I get it, but give, take, you take on this one, I'll take on that one. We'll
Call a partnership.
right. And the way we're intertwined, especially politics.
The chief's here. After everybody doing their best behavior.
All right, 7 o'clock, we're going to call the meeting to order. Clerk will note those in attendance.
Will be noted.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, moving on to approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes from the January 25th meeting? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are adopted. Next, moving on to item 3, adoption of the agenda. I think we have one item 4E, that we were removing. Is that correct? So we'll note that correction of the agenda. Does anyone else have any additions or changes to the agenda?
We taking it off the agenda or moving it to something else?
We're taking it off the agenda.
Altogether.
Seeing none, do I have a
Move
motion?
approval.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. We have an agenda. Moving on to item 4, the consent agenda.
Move to approve?
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Item 5, visitors and presentation, the Welcoming and Inclusive Community Task Force report. I understand we have a lot of members in the audience that have worked very hard on this and have a good, robust report for us. Where are we starting off tonight?
I'll be kicking us off, Mayor, members of council. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the task force members. They put in countless of hours throughout this process and the development of the report, and they've showed a true dedication to the process. There are some of the members are here in the audience, but there were also members who are joining us through the watching on live stream who are unable to be here this evening due to COVID and health concerns. So the numbers at home probably exceed the numbers here, but they were all very dedicated and I would say grateful to be a part of this and have some input. And so kicking us off this evening will be former City Manager Ellen Heinecker, who started this process.
Hello, Mayor, members of the council. It's really strange to be standing on this side of everything, so thank you so much for allowing me to be here tonight. I'm going to be really brief, which I know is hard for me to do, but I want to just give a really brief background on how this all started, and then we're going to take off with our task force members that are here to present the report, and there'll be a PowerPoint that follows. So for some of you, you know that when this all started, it started under the leadership of Mayor Jo Emerson when she felt it was very important to get some kind of conversation going on in our community about how are people feeling about being welcome, do they feel included in the community. Let's have some conversations, as other communities are also doing a lot of back in 2020 and also through 2021. We had participation from 2 of our council members that also talked with staff and with the mayor about the process, so thank you for that participation. And it was a difficult process to define because as it proceeded, it was very clear that it needed to be somewhat organic because the conversations really led our work. So each time we had conversations with different groups of people, it led the work into some conversation that perhaps we hadn't intended or hadn't planned on. So the task force was very flexible in its work and very, very, very wise and intentional about all of their efforts. So I would echo what Tracy had said in terms of the time and commitment they put into this report is countless hours. So thank you to those who are watching that are on the task force, and then to those that are in the audience. Just real briefly then, it did start in February of 2021 is when the task force first began to meet. It's an 18-member task force. People did apply for the task force, and that was promoted for several weeks in the press and other means. And those members were then selected, with the participation of the mayor, of course. And then the council had an opportunity to see the membership before the task force was finalized. And with that, the task force then, we needed to work through their own statement of purpose. I'm not going to go through that. That's in the report. There's many things that we won't cover, of course, because we would be here all night. But all of the work they did, and that especially was intentional, to call out the fact that they really wanted to reach out to a broad sector of the community. It was really, the intention was to talk to people who have persons with disabilities, have different sexual orientation, or perhaps, people who are feeling like they aren't included in the community because they're perhaps only been here for a year and their neighbor's been here for their lifetime. So how do we connect and engage with all members of our community? Because of the timing of this conversation and a lot of what was going on around the state and nation and a lot of conversations about race, a lot of what ended up being talked about in the focal point did point back to that conversation. It's what a lot of people wanted to be talking about, and we went with that as a task force, but we don't want to minimize the conversations we did have regarding people with other identities or newer people in our community that had things to say. So I think that was important to point out. The last thing I will point out, and then I'm going to give up the mic to the rest of the task force here, was that the report itself was brief as we could make it. We wanted it to be consumable to the council, and for the public to read through. But with that, there's trade-offs, right? So there's a lot that isn't in there. There's a lot of really brief summaries from a lot of work that was done with the survey, with conversations we had online, community conversations on race, and other work. But we needed to find out and kind of straddle that line throughout the report to figure out what to put in and what can we just leave out and wait for further conversation with council to talk about. So at any time, if council at some point would like more detailed summaries of any of that work, we've had conversations and we're happy to provide that. We just wanted to make sure that this is something that you could take a shot at and look at and ask questions as you move forward and you're thinking of it. So with that, I'm going to introduce, we have 3 members of the task force that are going to go through the presentation, and we're going to be starting with Chris Strife-Oji, and then they're each going to introduce themselves as they come up. So thank you.
Greetings, Mayor and Council members. My name is Chris Strife-Oji, and I just will start with the slide that's up right now. People's experiences and perceptions of belonging within a community can be influenced in part by aspects of their identity. While everyone has a unique set of circumstances that shape their life and outcomes, people who share certain identities such as gender, race, religious affiliation, length of residency, or socioeconomic situation may have similar experiences or perceptions. The task force believes it was important to understand the diversity in our community as we examine whether this is a community where all feel welcome and included. There are a number of ways to measure diversity, and we attempted to reflect that by including many of the census benchmarks in the report. Notably, the data demonstrates increasingly growing diversity when compared to the 2000 census and shows tremendous gains in those who identify as BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, among the youth. In 2000, over 94% of the total White Bear Lake population identified as white, non-Latino. That number is now just over 80%. For those 17 years of age and under, the percentage of BIPOC, or those identifying as BIPOC, grew from 10% in 2000 to 33.9% in 2020. This slide contains information about the White Bear Lake School District. The demographic of our youth can be a leading indicator for the future makeup of our community. Some things to point out include 27% of the students qualify for free and reduced lunch. And my guess is that that's a lot higher because right now all students are receiving free lunch because the USDA is providing free lunch to all students in the country as part of COVID support. So a lot of people are not filling out the forms for us to be able to gauge where we are exactly with that. In addition, there are 53 languages spoken among the White Bear Lake students, and almost 18% of students qualify for special education services. And these changing demographics will pose new opportunities and challenges and also for us to ensure that all feel welcomed and included. We want to make sure that we're reaching all of those populations. And it was apparent early on in the process that gathering information from a broad and diverse representation of the community would be challenging, especially with limitations on gathering due to the COVID pandemic. The task force decided upon a variety of methods to solicit participation, including the development of an online community conversation format, an online survey, opportunities for in-person conversations, and task force participation in the 5-part series, Community Conversations on Race, sponsored by Many Faces, with which the City of White Bear Lake is an active partner. Opportunities to participate were promoted multiple times through a variety of media, including the city's newsletter, the White Bear Press, social media, and through direct contact with community, nonprofit, civic, and faith-based organizations. I'll turn it over to Ellen now.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Thank you for having us. My name's Ellen Garola. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the community surveys. So the community-wide survey was available March through September through the city's POCL platform, an online survey tool. Despite extensive promotional efforts, the number of participants topped out at 139. Using a voter registration verification database, POCL was able to verify the general location of participants by wards and precincts. As shown on the map, there was broad representation from the greater White Bear Lake area, as well as from some communities beyond the White Bear Lake area. Given the small sample size and broader area of representation, the task force was careful not to draw emphasis on any conclusions. Nevertheless, the feedback was informative. A few of the more commonly themed responses cited the importance of diversifying the city staff, its boards and commissions. Some felt the city should tackle racial equity issues, while others thought the city should not address race at all. The majority felt included and welcomed in almost all places, including businesses and public spaces. However, there were several acknowledgments by those who identified as white that their experience may be different from those who are not white. The task force also developed an online small group discussion format that promoted dialogue around what it means to be a welcoming and inclusive community. 7 online meetings were held, along with one held in person at a local church. Again, getting people to participate in these conversations proved to be much more difficult than we anticipated. There are a variety of reasons why people chose not to participate, but it was clear early on that building momentum for meaningful engagement requires time to build relationships and trust. And we know that this challenge is not unique to White Bear Lake. We did hear directly from many BIPOC community members who expressed their reluctance to share their stories and/or expressed doubt that their feedback would lead to meaningful change. However, there were some general themes that emerged from these conversations, which were similar to ones revealed through the survey. White people who live in White Bear Lake have different experiences than BIPOC people living here. Feeling safe is an important part of feeling welcomed in a community. Feeling welcomed includes accessibility for people with disabilities, accessible signage in other languages, free and affordable activities. Many people don't know their neighbors or haven't made connections with them. So building relationships is hard. There are many people who were born in White Bear Lake or have lived in the community for many years. It can be difficult to be a newcomer in this community. In addition to the survey and online community conversations, the task force learned a lot from the feedback provided through meeting with student groups in the White Bear Lake area schools. There were 4 separate meetings with student groups representing a total of 91 community youth ages 12 to 18, the vast majority of which were students of color. Many BIPOC students shared personal experiences about being targets of direct racially charged comments, both at school and out in the community. Many expressed that they felt out of place in a mostly white community. Others shared positive feelings about living in the White Bear Lake area. However, mostly with qualifying comments, such as noting that the limited connection between BIPOC community and the community at large. At each of the meetings, students expressed their interest in community events that celebrate the racial and cultural diversity of our community. The Student-Led Culture Club was particularly interested in finding ways to work with the city and other organizations to organize community and cultural events.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Rebecca Blazingbauer. 15 years ago, I was in front of the council talking to you about pigeons. So it's great to be back 15 years later talking about people. So let's just go a little bit deeper into some of the findings. I want to talk about the community conversations on race. It was another great opportunity to learn from the experiences of our community members, particularly the first session. This session was designed to give community members an opportunity to listen to and learn from neighbors of color. At the first session, participants heard their neighbors share painful encounters and experiences that informed many robust conversations that occurred in the following 4 parts of that series. And as mentioned earlier, the city was a partner in planning in that 5-part series. So we turn to the next set of findings. I like the phrase iron sharpens iron. You might be familiar with it. Great way to sharpen your iron is to learn from others. And the task force invited staff representatives from 2 other metropolitan communities of Roseville and St. Louis Park. Each had been actively engaged in equity and inclusion work for 3 to 5 years. Invaluable lessons were learned from these staff representatives, including information on their past and current initiatives. And they were great lessons of successes, and they were equally great lessons of failures that they had had. So we learned a great deal from that. Both emphasized the need for an intentional commitment of time and resources in order to achieve meaningful community engagement. And they also stressed the importance of follow-up. Follow-up. I might have mentioned follow-up, but after the surveys and conversations in particular, so people trust that their participation was worthwhile and considered. This theme of building trust continued to emerge throughout our task force efforts and was reinforced by these staff representatives through their shared experiences. So in the following months of work to engage the White Bear Lake community in these crucial conversations, it was evident that community engagement is not an event or a one-time process. It must be sustained and continually evolve. Constructive relationships between communities and institutions of local government make community engagement not only desirable, but necessary, as it is likely to lead to a more equitable, sustainable public decisions and improve the livability, the image, and the economic viability of the White Bear Lake community. White Bear Lake has demonstrated its commitment to community engagement over the years. However, as the time of and attention of our residents, myself included, become increasingly scarce, we have competing demands for our time. Community engagement grows more challenging. Through this process, we experience that many do not trust government institutions, including the local level, or are simply too busy and disinterested. It became evident that the development of trusted relationships toward productive dialogue and engagement with a broader segment of the community is a commitment of dedicated time and resources. Reinforcing and building upon intentional and proactive community engagement is especially critical. As White Bear Lake demographics continue to change, with that change, the shift in community culture can create both difficult challenges and wonderful opportunities. While proximity of diverse cultures can lead to familiarity and acceptance, without intentionally in community building, it can also lead to division. For that reason, Proactive community engagement is necessary to foster learning and understanding through dialogue and relationship building, to achieve authentic engagement. All residents must feel included in the dialogue. The City Council's continued commitment to this work is critical to ensuring that strides made through connections fostered over the past several months are not lost.
So based on those conclusions, the task force discussed a variety of initiatives that could be explored by the city, many of which are included below. The initiatives have been considered through the lens of 3 intersectional categories: community engagement, organizational and administrative systems, and equity and inclusion lens. As was so clearly demonstrated through this process, sustained and meaningful community engagement requires a commitment of time and resources. As such, the task force would strongly encourage the City Council to consider adding a position to support this work. More immediately, however, the task force recommends the creation of a new city commission to serve in an advisory capacity similar to the Parks and Environmental Advisory Commission. The purpose of the commission could be to evaluate the city's outreach efforts, activities, and engagement opportunities, advise on strategies to improve outreach and communication to help increase engagement and inclusiveness, advise on policies and procedures related to inclusion, and engage in events and projects that support the commission's mission. With that in mind, the task force provided a list of suggested initiatives in the report to be further explored by a standing city commission.
The task force supports efforts to expand staff development towards strengthening cultural competency skills in order to build organizational capacity as the racial and cultural diversity of our community continues to expand. In addition to staff development, the task force recommends that the city seek opportunities to partner with White Bear Lake area schools and Century College to provide internships and work shadowing opportunities for students. And importantly, the task force recommends that the city invest in intentional and creative ways to recruit more diverse candidates for staff positions and city commissions, including BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, multicultural, and persons with disabilities. This becomes increasingly important as the community becomes more diverse to ensure the people who serve and lead the community reflect the diversity of the community they serve. And finally, the task force believes it is ultimately important that the city initiatives and policies be considered through an equity and inclusion lens. In other words, that we continue to ask ourselves how an initiative or policy impacts those who may identify with a culture or lifestyle different than one's own.
So, final thoughts. There was a real committed group of task force members that worked on this for many months, and we ask you to see them. Hopefully, the city has recommendations and feedback it needs to continue the work here. We ask you to act upon these. It's important to educate the public about how to get involved in the work of the government and why it matters. We ask you to be educators, to connect youth to government. They are our future, and we ask you to connect to them. Final thought is, we heard from people who did not think their voices mattered, did not want to, and we don't want to fulfill that prophecy. Hopefully, this process of intentional engagement continues with the leadership of the mayor and this council. We ask you to hear them. I'd like to conclude by saying, doing what is easy isn't always the best. It can be easy, quite frankly, to not read the report again. It can be easy to bid Chris, Ellen, and I good night and do your final acts of business. We'd ask you to not do what is easy, but we ask as a community for you to help us do what is best. Thank you, Mayor and council members.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you for all the members of the task force. I know there's a lot of work that went into this, and I'm sure it's been a labor of love for all these long months. My initial thoughts on the report are, I look at it as a report card. You guys did a nice snapshot of where are we at right now? How can we do better? I think there's a lot of positives to draw from the report. I think we've got a lot to be proud of in this city, and there's always opportunities to improve and do better. So the follow-up, which was said 4 times, that's the million-dollar question right now. I know it's going to be a continued conversation with the council, and we'll decide what to do with it and how best to go forward. But I'm sure there'll be lots of discussions regarding what that follow-up is. So with that, I do want to open up to the council. Council members Walsh or Jones, you worked on this. If you've got any comments or questions or things you'd like to add. Councilman Walsh.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, a couple of things. Just let me dig a little deep, and then I got some general comments. But on the, let's see, where am I on page 14, some of the themes that emerged. So from the top, the second bullet point, many highlighted positive interactions with various city departments, including admin, fire, police, cited as generally positive encounters. But then the next bullet, however, others cited experiences that were not as welcoming. I mean, you didn't include the verbatims in our report. I think there's a list of verbatims sort of from the survey, the online survey. I mean, have we gone through those in detail? And is there, I guess my question is it 90-10, positive to negative? Is it 70-30? And my follow-up would be, is there a way to communicate that? And maybe we should do it in public, but, now, but maybe it's a staff thing. Maybe it's another meeting with the staff. If there are things in those verbatims that come back as specific things that the chief could work on, or the license bureau, or building department, if there's things that came through in that, is there another way to follow up with the staff level? Maybe I guess that's one of I guess that's an observation. I don't need anybody to answer that. The engagement level is interesting. I think we couldn't get people to engage. So you can look at that a lot of ways. I mean, you can be negative or positive. I mean, if you're optimistic, you'd say, well, there's not a problem. People aren't concerned. They're not knocking on the door. They're not complaining. So low engagement doesn't always necessarily mean bad things. We joke about this all the time. We raise taxes pretty regularly here. Every couple of years, we up the levy, and we have a truth and taxation meeting. And I've been on this council 6 years, and we haven't had a contentious truth and taxations meeting since I've been here, even though we've been consistently raising people's taxes. So we're not raising them at a level enough to cause, people to show up and knock on the door. So I said, okay, that's a good thing, but I don't know. I mean, I'm just responding to what I read. I guess I have no question or comment, but the engagement thing it just stood out to me is that we started the task force. I think the mayor would agree with this. In a reaction to George Floyd's death. I mean, that's no secret. I mean, we saw what's going on in the community. There's a heightened level of conversation on these topics. We should look at White Bear Lake. Let's use this as a reason, as a impetus to start this. So I just wonder, whether or not we do the standing commission or not, if there's a way to be ready. And maybe this work helps us get ready, but there may be an incident in the future in our city or in a neighboring city or another, even in the Twin Cities, that we may need a reaction to. And it might be at that moment we can get people engaged because something happened, And so are we ready to respond? Are we ready to, stand up the infrastructure, a community meeting, whatever we need to do? And maybe that's one thing I took away is, okay, we didn't get that many people to participate, but maybe there'll be a time in the future when people will have a lot to say, and are we ready to sort of respond? I guess that's my thought. Maybe staff can take that up, or maybe that's what lives out of this. If it's not a freestanding, ongoing commission, at least it's an infrastructure ready to respond in the future. So those are my rambling thoughts. And I will say I appreciate, Dan and I sort of started and kicked it off, and then and I attended some of the meetings. I attended the meeting with the other city people coming in. It was fascinating. And that theme, which we got back in this survey too, is that the lack of trust is surprises me. That's not my experience. So folks don't trust that there's going to be follow through. That came through loud and clear from the other cities that we met with, and then it came through here too. I don't know what to do about that. I mean, except to say that we all take this all very seriously. Everything we do here, we take very seriously and expect to follow up and work on. And I guess you can't build trust without actually following through, right? So that was my other observation. So I'll be done rambling.
Coughing.
Take your time.
So I do want to thank, obviously, like everybody else, I started off, I'm like, I'll be honest, I'm like, ooh, this is going to get scary. I want to make sure what I believe, born and raised here, I'm the rubber stamp white guy, right? And I didn't want it to go too far one way or too far the other. And one of the things with former Mayor Emerson, starting it off, Bill, you said the reaction to the tragic death of George Floyd. What I liked best about the timing of it, former Mayor, was that it wasn't a knee-jerk.
Yeah.
It was, let's take a breath, let's take a pause. We all recognize that there's something, let's just realize what we're grasping. I thought that was one of the best things that Mayor Emerson did, was take a pause. And I know I had comments from some, we need to be doing something now. And I get that, but we didn't know what to do. I don't think anybody really knew in 10 days or 30 days or even 3 months what the ramifications were. And I don't think we still do today. It's obviously things happening. But the dedication that you guys showed to a particular person that, I actually have a daughter named Sam too, that, wow, spell bee checker. That was scary. I was still reading all the emails. Did I check out from the actual? Yeah, I did. Because I trusted. And when you heard that word trusted, I trusted you as a council member to say, I don't need to be here. I'm confident that you're going in a direction that needs to be going, wherever that direction needs to go. And that's what I'm really thankful for, of where, the WIC committee went. I take the advantage of saying, yeah, I think Bill was saying an infrastructure, I don't know where that would be, Mr. Mayor, in the future, looking for, Bill, I like where you're going, but I don't want to say, how do we react without being reactive? And that's what everybody's been doing for how long? We react. We don't be proactive. And I don't think we're ever going to do it right no matter what we do. It's always going to be pitchforks and torches, and that's okay. It's like, are we equipped to listen, to respond, to at least say, hey, follow up? That's what I think the very first step is. How do we say this is not going to get filed as a nice report, and thank you. What goes forward? And I think that's discussion that we need to have over a period of time. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen probably 6 months from now, to be honest. It's a big thing to chew. So, but I think it needs to be, we got to start taking bites. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else on the council have any thoughts or comments on it? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there were, as I read and reflected, there were 3 things that came to me. The first was the last several years have been enlightening to me about the hidden or not so hidden forces of structural racism that have been baked into the systems that we operate today. Redlining, covenants, a variety of things. I didn't read anything in this report that suggested the presence of those in our community. If they were there, I'm hoping that they would be called out so that we can have something specific to work on. If they're not there, I'll take that as a positive. If they just didn't happen to surface, okay, let's keep our ears open. So there's a continuous process of listening. But that was one item that I pulled out. So as one example of what that might look like. A year ago, I started just asking questions about, has our police force, have we ever settled a lawsuit and paid damages for police brutality? The answer is no. What's our, what data do we have about how we perform in the course of doing the work, what does the arrest record or traffic interaction data say to us, and what systems do we have? What are the things that we have been doing that might minimize some of the charged situations? So anyway, I've become more comfortable saying we have actually, whether it's been intentional or unintentional, or whether we've fixed some things, we've done some good stuff. It doesn't pop up. So that was one bucket of conversation. A second one caused me to ponder the question, okay, there's a lot of work for communities. What is the particular roles that are unique to government and the priorities of government? I'll be honest, I don't feel a particular, as a city, wearing a city council member hat, I don't feel a particular obligation to ensure that Joe, who lives next to Sammy, that Joe and Sammy have coffee, that they know each other. I don't take that on as my responsibility. Where that takes me is to say that there are a number of places in community, not just government, our faith communities, our school, and I love the reference to Century, the opportunity for internships, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole wide number of places where these conversations need to happen, but they're not the role of government, or at least not a high priority role for government at this level. So it's to say, is there a role for a commission or a group of motivated citizens or whatever to ensure that those conversations are occurring outside of those narrowly government spaces? And then we get into the area of, okay, what are the places where government has a particular role to play? So for example, the outreach that you called out the role of our public safety, both police and fire, positively, I think, and the recommendation is that an opportunity for engaging other city staff in similar kinds of conversation. I don't know. City manager, I'm going to look to you to say, first of all, you're drinking from a fire hose still. You've been here all of, 38 days? Over the course of the year, I actually will welcome and look forward to you reflecting on what are those things that engage things like staff training, recruitment of qualified individuals from diverse populations, an examination of our hiring practices. Are there things that we have not, are there stones that should be overturned or not? I don't know. That's not my bailiwick, but to leave it in yours. And are there those places where we do have a particular role? I'm going to say there's things for staff, and you get to be head of that. There are other things that I think are for us as members of council, whether that involves discussions about a commission, whether it involves other expenditures. Okay, all of it is fair game. It's worth considering. There may be things about how transparent are we in communicating what we're going to be thinking about, what we're going to be working on, and what action we've taken. Have we done our absolute best in engaging around all of that? Maybe we have, and maybe not quite. I can actually think of a couple pregnant topics where casting a broader net in communication and notification might be useful. So anyway, we can have those conversations. That's the second bucket. It's what are the priority things that city government can do, and what do we prioritize that, and where does that fit? And I actually would encourage us to have some conversation, perhaps by August-ish, about what might be things, if it's going to go in the 2023 budget, we're going to have those conversations over the next 6 to 8 months so that they end up in a preliminary budget that goes out in September. So anyway, that's second bucket. And then the third bucket has to do with Yeah, I had it written down here. I'll have to. Well, it's actually escaping my brain at the moment. I'll let it go. We are at the beginning of a conversation. I actually would like us to do something. So Mayor, whether you schedule it as a part of a check-in conversation sometime in the next 12 months, or a couple of check-ins on specific topics, might be a way of keeping our attention focused. Pick a time that when it seems right, you and the city manager have that prerogative, and I think that would be a useful way of avoiding this going on a shelf. I'll stop there.
Anyone else on the council? Well, then I'll just close by saying I think that's certainly a commitment we can make to continue a conversation at some point. Right now, we're in digest the information mode, and that's good that that's a long period of time. As we've opined and others have said, knee-jerk reactions aren't necessarily serving our best interests. So we got a report card. Let's study it, let's learn it, and give the council some time to reflect on it, and we'll see what the follow-up is going forward. Thank you all again for your presentation and all your hard work on the task force. Okay, moving on to item 6, public hearing. We have nothing scheduled. And item 7, unfinished business. We also have nothing scheduled. So it brings us to item 8, new business A, resolution denying a request by Jeff McDonald, Tice Estates for a preliminary plan and planned unit development at 1788 Highway 96 East. Is this Ms. Kane?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Subject site, 1788 Highway 96 is located on the south side of County Road 96, just east of Columbia Park in White Bear Township. It is zoned R4, 1 and 2 family, single family residential, 1 and 2 family residential. The property is 1.85 acres in size and contains a single family residence on the northern portion. The property is encumbered with a 33-foot wide utility easement that runs north-south along the western property line, and a 60-foot utility easement that runs east-west through the property in line with Clarence Street. These easements are how sewer and water were extended to the existing homes on Clarence Street. Similar to the homes to the east that were platted from larger parcels back in the 1880s from the Ramaley Park plat here, the Tice Estate is here today. I can't do my math, 150 years later, 140 years later, requesting similar subdivision, and they would like to subdivide their property into 6 lots. 1 lot for the existing single-family residence, and I'll just point out in this alignment, north again is to the left because of just the configuration of the lot and PowerPoint. There would be 4 duplex lots here highlighted in yellow, and 1 shared lot for shared stormwater and common area that would include yards and driveways. Consequently, at the October Planning Commission meeting, the applicant had requested a preliminary plat to subdivide the property into 6 lots, and both concept plan and development stage approval for a PUD. At the October Planning Commission meeting, the matter was continued in order to provide time for the City Council to make a decision regarding the Fifth Avenue right-of-way area issue. And since that time, the Fifth Avenue vacation has been resolved. As you may recall, and I'm happy to answer any questions following, that the city attorney did conclude that the city continues to hold all of that right-of-way south of the north edge of Clarence Street, and the City Council decided that no action was necessary. I will say that Ramsey County has since corrected their maps. The applicant proposed envelope lots, sort of like a condominium plat, in that the units would be independently owned and that the common areas, the lawns, the driveway, and the stormwater ponds would be collectively owned and maintained by the association. In the original staff report, staff had noted that the style of plat was the only reason for the PUD because 4 duplexes could be built by right on this parcel. However, since the October Planning Commission meeting, staff conducted additional analysis and discovered that is not the case, that without this PUD utilizing the envelope lots, the site can only support 2 duplexes and 2 single-family residences. This is because the 35-foot drainage easement on the western portion of the property pushes all the buildable area 33 feet, which is quite a wide side yard when only 10 feet is required by our code. This easement encumbers the property in such a way that while sufficient square footage exists to support 4 duplex lots, the easement pushes the buildable areas so far to the east that setbacks can't be maintained. And I'll be happy to go back to this. The minimum lot width is 80 feet for the duplex and 60 for a single-family lot. In an attempt to address some of the concerns that we did hear at the October Planning Commission meeting, staff had worked with the design team to make modifications to the elevations with both some additional ornamentation, some additional introduction of materials onto both the front facade as depicted here. And the side elevations really show the extent of the second story. It's really limited to just a small portion in the middle of the footprint of the home. These are, I believe, about 1,100 square foot units with 2 bedrooms, 1-car garage, and so they are smaller relative to the current housing stock. And you can see that depicted on the floor plans here. Of the proposed duplexes, many members of the Planning Commission echoed concerns that had been voiced by neighbors that this particular proposal was simply too much, not necessarily opposed to the actual development of the property, but just that this project does not fit within the existing character of the neighborhood. One cited that perhaps 4 duplexes with 1 car per duplex was not the right design for this particular lot. The motion to recommend approval of the request failed on a vote of 2 in favor and 4 opposed. The members in support of the proposal appreciated the project offering newer unit types in the community and citing the change was rather incremental in its scope. However, based on the recommendation of the Planning Commission, a draft resolution of denial was prepared for the request and included in your packets for your consideration this evening, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have, and a representative of the Tice Estate is also present this evening. Thank you.
Council, any questions for Ms. Kane? Councilman Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The new information, can you just, the west edge of the property, what are we dealing with here? I wasn't catching all of that. Is it drainage? Is it water we're worried about, or what is the new limitation that pushes everything over?
Let me just clarify that we knew the utility easement was there. We know that a large storm drain runs underneath that, the ditch, Dillon ditch.
Oh, that's part of Dillon's ditch. Okay, yeah.
So that's not new information, but it makes it unbuildable for obvious reasons. And so while the lot, I believe.
Oh, but this plan deals with that, though. This plan works in terms of the Dillon's ditch.
Yes.
The one in front. Okay, I guess that's my. Okay,
Yes.
I see. They knew that and they designed for it.
Yes, through the PUD, creating the 4.
So the new
duplex lots.
information is that a new plan might be more limited if you're going to. If you're not
Apply
going to
the
do
straight zoning
yeah.
of a 60-foot wide lot for single family and 80 feet.
Without the envelope
Because it's
and-
160 feet wide, 165 feet in width. But when you subtract out that 33-foot easement, the result, at 132 feet, thank you, just does not allow that 60-foot to 80-foot wide buildable envelopes to be created.
And then my other question is, I don't know that I've asked this before or not, but and I don't know if the developer would help answer it, but the one-car garage thing, that's one of the things I hear a lot, not just from people in the neighborhood, but people all over the city. Is like, is that a thing? Does the market want that? I mean, I trust developers usually that when they put something on paper, they know that there's a demand. But that seems it's different to me, I guess. I mean, we went big in the suburbs with 3-car garages. I mean, I remember I had a house in Hugo with a 3-car garage, and my joke was that I only owned 1 car. I used to park my wheelbarrow in that 3rd stall, just right in the center, just to take it up. I didn't really need 3-car, but 2-car, yes. So is that a market demand? Are we going to see more of this?
Mayor, Councilmember Walsh, I think our housing analysis and the housing report that Maxfield conducted a few years ago revealed the dramatic change in household composition, and I believe we're at 40% single-person households, which is a complete switch of where we were in the 1970s. So I think it is a growing demographic, not only unique to White Bear, but certainly the Maxfield study demonstrated that was the case.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else on the council have a thought, comment, question? Councilmember Hughes.
So the Dillon Ditch, this whole 33-foot easement, known to the owner of the property forever? Or is this sort of a development over the last 20-plus years?
Great question. Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Hughes. That actually was acquired from the owners, the Tice family, that owned it for many years. It would have been a utility that was secured and compensated for either through the city, and I don't know who maintains it. It still is city utility easement, right? So the city would have compensated them for acquisition of that easement in 1967. 54 years
I guess
ago.
I'm just confused because I'm new at looking at this. So when we look at this gray shaded area, is the easement included in this gray shaded area, or is it outside of it? Is this the ditch, or is it in this area right here?
This is the utility easement here, 33 feet.
Okay. So it's in the drawing, and it appears to be, okay. So they've known forever they can't build on that section of it?
That's correct.
Okay. So it's a hardship that's been created. And so if we went ahead with the PUD, would you even know offhand, like what kind of, back to variances again, we're back to my being elementary level here. When does that part of the discussion come in? What do those look like in order to get what they want out of this envelope system? Is this like 75 variances of various kinds, or is it just the one on the east side because the building is so close to the street? I mean, are there a lot of them?
Mayor, Councilmember Hughes, because I believe there are just, if the PUD was approved, it would represent relief from the minimum lot area for 2 of the lots, to allow duplexes, or actually all 4 of the lots, because they're at 64 and 65 feet in width.
But that's just, I'm sorry to interrupt, that's just on the width. Is it also on the placement of the building?
No,
no. So there's no easement?
Let me back up and clarify, because the applicant or the developer had requested a variance on the eastern property line to have a 5-foot setback. Staff was not supportive of that. Planning Commission, even despite recommending denial of this, was not leaning towards that. So I think at a minimum, the 10-foot would need to be provided along the eastern edge where this infill development would abut the existing residence, right? So the minimum 10-foot side yard on that side, equivalent to what the neighbors on the existing lots in Romali's Park already provide.
So no variance is necessary under their new drawing?
For that setback, just for the setback along the east lot line, there would be, the PUD really eliminates the formal need for a variance.
Okay.
But
Okay, so that wouldn't come up again, but I guess
No,
in terms of it saying, but otherwise, the drawing, short of the fact that they don't have the lot width, fits within the scope necessary. The only thing we'd be saying here, the only thing we'd kind of be saying here is we're allowing you to put 4 duplexes where you technically don't have the width.
Yep.
But we're not changing, but you are following the zoning requirements or the easement requirements as far as placement and next door neighbors and all of these things.
Condensing the area where those 4 duplexes would be put on the property as a result of the easement, if that makes sense. The buildable area of the subdivision would just be tightened
Okay.
to the eastern portion of the site.
Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, just my opinion, I really don't have any questions. I'm just looking at 10 pounds of sand going into about a 7-pound sack. It's just too dense. So listening, and I'm looking at the drawings, and what really made me start thinking that was seeing the driveways taper down to kind of not a single entry lane, but kind of a car and a half parking issue. So when people do come over, yeah, everybody's going to one car. It's not about having one car, it's about having stuff. Are you going to say nobody's going to have an RV, nobody's going to have snowmobiles, nobody's going to have a boat, nobody's going to have a... Where is that going to go? It's going to go on the driveway, it's going to go in the street for temporarily, some of the time. Neighbors aren't going to like it. The additional traffic that it is, listening to the residents in the area already, 7 pounds sack. So.
Garages are a stall and a half for storage.
Okay.
Ms. Kane.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Jones, I know that wasn't a question, but I just do want to point out another important fact for the council's consideration is that through the planned unit development, there is greater control, not just on the building designs, and, you know, we'll go to this exhibit here, is that there would be an association that manages the exterior of this property, and many homeowners associations have restrictions that can go above and beyond what the city's regulations are, so it could be retaining a parking spot in the garage, and that's for them to enforce, not the city. It could be them saying no RVs on the parking or on the hard surface driveway, even though the city would allow it, their own HOA. So it does give the city a little bit extra layer because the city will be required to review those HOA documents before they're recorded with the plat. So I just want to point that out.
Councilwoman Hughes.
Just because I'm new and I don't know how, Mr. Mayor, I don't know how this works. Are we discussing the entire thing, or are we simply asking questions right now and not moving to a discussion? I just don't know how it works.
I'm going to defer to Ms. Kane for where we're at in the process and what this means, if it's ultimately denied or approved.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Hughes. So tonight is the request for the final approval for both concept plan, PUD, which sometimes, you know, if you're up in Hugo and you're dealing with a 40-acre farm, you might be dealing with a 100-unit subdivision. So not all of the details are refined, and it may be broken out into phases. When we're dealing with a 1.85-acre site, it's not uncommon to mix these together and say, let's go through concept plan and final. So there would be some refinement of perhaps these elevations, working at the staff level. But for the council, this request tonight, or this matter before you this evening, is for final approval of the PUD. And the only step necessary to come back is after a long time of working with staff on the homeowners association documents and the final plat, as long as it reflects, you know, this layout, that all of a sudden the northern lot hasn't gotten, you know, 14% smaller, or they're trying to squish in a 5th duplex now. As long as it really is consistent with this, that's an administrative thing that comes to the council. And I think you had one on your agenda last month for the Rooney Farm, and it was just a final plat. And we just said it's the same, different builder, and it was really just a straightforward business procedure of the council.
So, council, what would we like to do? Councilman Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is my ward. I mean, so the resolution in front of us is a denial because that's what the Planning Commission said. So I'll move the resolution as written. Get that on the table, then we can discuss that action. As soon as there was a second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Point of order, just to clarify, it's the motion to deny?
Well, it's the resolution in front of us, which
Okay.
is a
I'm
denial.
just, we've got a negative and a negative, so I'm just trying to make sure it's.
Oh, sorry, no, I'm moving the resolution.
We got a motion on the resolution as written, which denies the
A
request.
yes vote is a no, yeah. Because it's a yes vote on the resolution.
Right.
Because the word deny is in the resolution.
Go ahead, Councilman Bradford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Just to clarify, we've got a motion and a second, and we are now discussing.
So the minutes of the Planning Commission and Ms. Kane's summary of that was entirely accurate. I was in attendance at that meeting. Another issue that was raised by the Planning Commission was that the nature of this proposal is out of character with the surrounding neighborhood, both in structure, size, density, and the issue of parking was raised. Adequacy of parking, likelihood of parking in the cul-de-sac, et cetera, et cetera. So those were all items. I was out, I looked at that space, and I concur with their judgment. So I'm in support of the motion to deny.
Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Walsh.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the resolution. I'm going to vote for the resolution. It's not an easy vote. I support development. I support development in this area. It's just the Planning Commission did have two meetings on this. I was at one, you were at one, and so I generally trust them, and I took a lot of testimony, and so I'm going to vote in support of the resolution. But I hope the developer comes back with something that's better, fits the character of the neighborhood, the objections the Planning Commission had, the neighbors had, and I'll be willing to look at that very strongly. So,
Anyone else for discussion? Councilmember Hughes.
Mr. Mayor, I actually am really tempted to not say anything because it would be really easy, but I feel like part of my job here is to have an opinion. First, I am hesitant to say that I don't support what the Planning Commission agreed with here. I'm going to vote against it. Partly because of a number of things. I think one, having a PUD on this spot, I think gives us a lot of control to fix a lot of the things that people are complaining about, as Ms. Kane said, in terms of talking about ensuring that the actual site is cleaned up, that there isn't a tractor in somebody's front yard or something else that you don't get if it's simply private property. I had a neighbor who had a toilet and an old tub in their backyard for months, and there's nothing illegal about it. So this would stop some of that for the people who lived nearby. I'm struck by the fact that there's only one garage, but I've lived in an 1,100 square foot unit, and there's not a lot of people living in a 1,100 square feet. I think that it feels like one of the things that people are worried about is that there's going to be 3 and 4 and 17 people living in each of these places, and you're going to go from how many drivers are you having? And I guess I would further that out to say I have another neighbor who has a very narrow driveway, and gosh, if they're listening, I love you and I love your family. They each have cars. Their 3 kids have cars. Lots of people have cars. Their lot itself can't maintain all of their cars, and when it snows, they're moving them all over the place in order to get them out of the way. And you get to do that. But so it happens in all neighborhoods, not just in ones that are not just in the new ones. We have cars up and down my street, outside on the street. Whether or not they fit inside their own garage because their garage has stuff or not, it's their private property to deal with to a certain extent. And so I'm hesitant to I'm hesitant to stop his development of his private property. I get that we're talking about the fact that he doesn't have enough space for this, but the thing that I feel like he could turn around and do is say, okay, I'm going to take it from 4 duplexes to 2 duplexes and 2 houses, and now you have 0 controls, and people will park all over the place because I have got no HOA, and Anyway, so there are, I guess, some of my messy thoughts on this, because this is kind of the first time I've had to do this. I feel like some of the things that are complained about are legitimate complaints, but aren't necessarily the kind of thing that really should stop his ability to develop the property like this. I think we gain a lot as a city in terms of the controls of this that we will lose. I think that there was something there. So I'll stop there by trying to get it on the record, but I think I just made a mess of myself. So there we are.
All right, any further discussion? I've got a motion and a second for item 8A, resolution denying a request for Jeff McDonald, Tice Estate for a preliminary plan and planned unit development at 1788 Highway 96. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No, nay.
The motion carries. The resolution denying the request is passed. Moving on to 8B, resolution approving a request by architects and engineers on behalf of the city of White Bear Lake for site plan approval for the public safety building renovation and expansion at 4701 Highway 61. Ms. Kane.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The city's P Public Facility Zoning District requires Planning Commission review of significant capital improvements, not including normal maintenance not including normal maintenance and other routine improvements to properties. Last fall, as you may recall, the City Council authorized preparation of final plans and specifications for this project, and those plans were presented to the Planning Commission for review and approval in accordance with our zoning code last month. The city is planning the renovation and expansion of the public safety building located here on the municipal campus, and it consists of both the city, it consists of the city hall along with both the police department and fire station number 1, collectively called the public safety building, and it has the P public underlying zoning district. In anticipation of this project, the city purchased the 2 residential lots west of the campus back in the 1990s. And last fall, you may recall that the council did vacate Miller Avenue right-of-way between 2nd and 3rd Streets to facilitate the planned building expansion, which extends both to the west and to the south, and a small bump out along the north side of the building. Overall, this campus is 2.75 acres. Again, the request this evening is site plan review of the significant capital improvements planned for the White Bear Lakes Public Safety Building, renovation and expansion planned for this year. And I'll remind the council, when a property or parcel is purchased for the uses that are allowed in the P Public District, zoning district, those parcels are automatically zoned and designated for P Public upon acquisition for that intended use. So there's not a formal rezoning that's required tonight. And some of you who are on the board may recall that from when the school district expansion and acquisition went through. As mentioned, the site plan does include 3 components. One, the construction of a police squad garage, shown in blue here. They were creative with their color selection. The replacement of the fire apparatus bay is constructed back in 1961, shown in red here, and will incorporate space necessary to meet current federal health and safety standards that prescribe separate zones for contaminated fire gear and the addition of dorm room capacity upstairs to accommodate the new city's full-time combination fire ambulance response model. And finally, on the north end, up near 3rd Street, you can see a small yellow area, and that's a 20 by 40 storm shelter off of the existing training facility that is now required by the state building code, and was also incorporated into all of the public school buildings as well.
Meaning of bomb shelter.
Legislative agenda, we forgot that one. We got to get that on the legislative agenda.
Gosh.
So stupid.
Let me see. Here, we've got a variety of elevations, and the new fire bay has been sized to accommodate the modern equipment, as well as show off the old equipment with a prominent corner element down by the 2nd Street sidewalk where the La France will be on display. So It also results in some modifications to the current parking configuration in front of the public safety building and will allow for the emergency equipment to actually drive through the apparatus bay and no longer require that the backing up of the equipment. So it really improves both safety for our firefighters, our staff, and the general public who are driving past oftentimes on Second. Let's see. And then you can see here, the police department currently has 4 indoor temperature-controlled parking spaces and a 19-vehicle fleet. The newly constructed police garage, shown here on the lower part of the screen, will provide for indoor parking for 34 vehicles indoor, including access to the 2 existing sally ports, which are used for suspect booking. Vehicles will enter off of 3rd Street to the north and exit here on this shared driveway with the fire egress, with access to the signalized light on Highway 61 for the majority of responses. Let's see. As the council is well aware, today's police squads are equipped with technology and tools that need to stay warm in the winter and cool in the summer. With no indoor parking, our squads are currently left idling and rotated throughout the current available indoor parking to keep them from getting too cold or too warm. In addition to the indoor parking of squad vehicles, the police department has a general need for secure indoor storage for evidence and equipment. West of this, I'm going to go back to the site plan. And west of the blue expanded police garage, where the 2 homes were acquired back in the 1990s, will be a new 45-stall parking lot surrounded by a 6-foot fence with secured entrances at both the north and south end. Both those entrances will be both ingress and egress. So this is really intended for public safety and employee parking. And so as they depart or arrive for shift, they can come and go as they like. It will have a key fob type of entrance. The fence along the north and south will be wrought iron in appearance and will provide a solid privacy fence along the western property line where it abuts the 2 adjoining residential properties for both visual screening and buffering of noise and headlights. This is also the location, even though on this plan it shows that the trash enclosure will still be down near the fire station. It actually will be in this enclosed parking area at the northeast corner of this site plan. So, and again, just have these elevations to walk the council through. If you have any questions, these are the full existing as well as expanded building elevations and material samples. I believe they've all been taken home.
I saw them last week.
They were here. And let's see, the Planning Commission did forward a unanimous recommendation to the council for approval of the proposal. And I do want to note back in December, when plans were still preliminary in concept and scope, staff sent notices to all the abutting neighbors and offered to meet with them one-on-one to walk them through those plans. No one took us up on that offer, and no one attended the Planning Commission hearing to offer any input. And we did provide a draft resolution of approval for the capital improvements to the public safety building. The project architect with Wold is here this evening, and supporting staff are also present. If you have any questions for any of us, we'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Move to approve, and thank you for moving the trash.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Resolution passes. Moving on to 8C, resolution accepting feasibility report and ordering public hearings for the 2022 pavement rehabilitation project, city project number 22-01. Mr. Copy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So each year, the city has traditionally taken on a pavement reconstruction rehabilitation project. 2022 is no different. So we typically kick these projects off with a neighborhood meeting. That is really to gather information from the neighbors to garner any initial comments, issues, things like that we need to look at through the design and the feasibility report preparation. So we had that neighborhood meeting in October. Back in October, we had 11 of approximately 280 homes or properties that will be impacted by the project showed up. Most of them were general questions. There is some sidewalk that is proposed as part of the project, so there are some questions on the sidewalk. I'll get to that in a little bit. So the first step in any project through Chapter 429 of Minnesota State Statute, if we assess any portion of the project, we need to follow certain steps. So the first step of that is to follow that, or to prepare a feasibility study to present to council for consideration to move forward with the project. We're going to go through, project scope. So this year's project scope is a combination of a number of different pavement preservation and reconstruction techniques. We'll have a small area that will just be a mill and overlay, which is removing the top surface of the roadway, replacing the surface. The curb is in good shape. It's an existing urban section. The next type of construction that we do is full pavement replacement. Depending on the time when areas were constructed, some of them were constructed with inferior pavement sections, meaning the initial pavement was too thin, there wasn't enough gravel, the subgrade was poor, based on the exploration that we do from soil borings as part of this process. So in that one, we actually remove all the pavement, regrade it, recompact everything, and put a full pavement section back on. And then the final method that we use is a full reconstruction. There's a number of areas, including one alley, that will be completely removing the pavement. There's no curb and gutter on these areas. They're quite old sections before we really started to get into the urban sections. Replacement in the 80s when we started to take some of these rural sections and turning them into a urban section similar to that was constructed in the southern part of White Bear Lake in the latter part of the development. So, as part of the project scope, much of what we do are repairs in the areas. We do spot utility repairs, storm sewer, sanitary sewer, water main, replace valves, anything that's damaged below surface so that once we put these new roads on top, they don't get, we minimize the risk of any repairs in the at least near term. Like I said, there is some sidewalk that we have proposed as part of the project, and as well as some private utility work. So there's the Xcel Energy, some of the communications. They'll come in and do repairs. Gas has traditionally gone into some of these areas and done complete gas line replacements. Let's try to get that out of the way as part of this project as well. So I'll go into the area. So the area that we're generally talking about is north of Highway 96 and west of Highway 61 in that quadrant. You can see at the bottom the streets that are in red are slated for full reconstruction. Those in blue are for full pavement rehabilitation. And then we have one street that we have for just a mill and overlay, which is in much better condition. As far as the sidewalks go, there's quite a network of existing sidewalks and trails in the area, including along Highway 96, Birch Lake Avenue, obviously Highway 61 and the Lake Links Trail. We also are right now in preliminary design for a project that slated for like in 2024, 2025 with Ramsey County on Otter Lake Road to extend a sidewalk up from Highway 96 up to 4th Street. So it's going to be important to look at these neighborhood connections, one of them being on Florence. To get that from 4th over to the west to Birch Lake School. And we have one on 4th Street, which will, there's a small segment of trail sidewalk within Yost Park, but it doesn't extend all the way down to Highway 96 nor to Birch Lake Avenue. And then there's one more segment on Karen Place. There's a small segment that is constructed from Florence down to that kind of cul-de-sac area. but it does not extend all the way down to 96. So those are the 3 segments that would be proposed. They are shown in the city's comprehensive plan that was adopted by council recently. So those are areas that we will look at for sidewalk placement. Again, there was a few questions about it, and I know in the past council's had some tough decisions. We've had some good discussions. That will be in the next step of this process, where we will have an assessment or a public hearing on the project, where residents can come voice their opinion for or against the projects, voice any concerns, and council then would give staff direction on how to proceed. So we'll, once we send the public hearing notices out after tonight, if council elects to move forward with the project, we'll include detailed information on the sidewalk and other proposed work that we're doing, so that residents are informed of what is happening in the neighborhood, and they can attend that public hearing as they see fit, whether they support the project or against the project, or even portions of the project. So we'll look for council's input on that at our next meeting. So next steps would be at the March 8th council meeting. If council elects to adopt the resolution tonight, we would hold a public improvement hearing. And with any either as presented or any changes that come about as part of that hearing, council would order the project and hopefully authorize staff to go out for bids on the project. If that moves forward, then council would be recommended an award of contract at the April 12th meeting. Construction typically begins sometime in May after road restrictions are off. And assessment hearing, typically we hold that in the fall. There are a few things that come up during a project, utility repairs. Sometimes we're going to dig down on a number. We have about a dozen private water lines that we're unsure of whether they are galvanized or lead out in the streets. And we've been doing that in the older areas to make sure that those get replaced before we put a new street on top of it. The residents are responsible for water and sewer services from the main to their homes, but we have the council's adopted a program where we help assist those residents to do it as part of the project to minimize damage to the street in the future. So with that being said, tonight staff would recommend that council adopt the resolution, or adopt a resolution accepting the feasibility report and ordering the public improvement hearing. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Copy. Council, any questions? Councilman Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, this is my neighborhood, so I've already gotten some feedback on sidewalks. Sidewalks are always tough. Nobody wants a sidewalk. So my sales pitch is connectivity throughout the city to trails. It's part of the comprehensive plan. It's not willy-nilly. This has been thought of. There's a reason we're adding a sidewalk to Florence. Is it on the north side? The diagram looked like the sidewalk's planned for the north side. Has that been decided? The sidewalk already on the north side there, I'm trying to think, on Florence?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Walsh, the current locations of, at least from a preliminary engineering standpoint, the sidewalk would be on the north side of Florence. We look at minimizing tree loss. We look at other impacts to utilities, power poles, pedestals for phone and cable TV, things like that. Other private improvements, topography, things like that. So Florence, at this point, we propose on the north side. The one on 4th Street is proposed on the east side, as the park is on that side, Serenity is on that side. Makes sense to continue that up. Yep. I can go back to and then the sidewalk on Cairn is proposed to be on the west side. I'm looking at it from an impact standpoint and topography. That is the most reasonable place to put it.
And you've looked at lot size and proximity of the house, the residence to the street. I mean, one of the concerns I've heard so far is that it's going to be, my house is so close to the street already, and the sidewalk's going to take another big piece of my yard, and that's a legit concern. I mean,
correct. So. Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Walsh, we look at all those factors. Obviously, the sidewalk is proposed within the city's right-of-way. Yep. So Where somebody decides to build their home within their lot typically falls within zoning code where they have to have setbacks. So some homes are built closer to that setback, some are built further away from that setback, depending on how each individual home is built. Generally speaking, in the area, they're all fairly close to the same distance. There's not a significant variation from lot to lot, but there may be some that are slightly closer than others.
Thank you.
Council, anything else?
To approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion carries and the resolution passes. And finally, moving on to 8D, first reading of the water meter ordinance. Mr. Copy.
Oh, no, I don't. I guess I don't. I was thinking I had a slide in there, but Mayor, members of the council, so let me grab my right sheet here. So what we have before you would be amendment to sections 401.020 and 401.030 of the municipal code pertaining to water meters. So as most of you know, in early 2021, the city undertook a water meter replacement program. The city had initially started doing these replacements on their own through our water division staff. Over about a 5 or 6 year period, they managed to get about 2,000 water meters replaced throughout the city, focusing on the worst of the worst. In the last 2 years, we were informed by our vendor that was doing our water meter reading that they would no longer be in the business at the end of 2021. So we scrambled to get together a project, bonding together, and looked at doing a plan to do the remaining 6,500 meters within the city. Really what that does is modernize our meter reading system to our drive-by radio read system. So our staff can do those reads really just by driving throughout town with a city vehicle. We have a meter reading. The water meters give out a signal, and we're able to pick that up. They follow a map, and it tells them which meters they've read or not read, and very efficient, very quickly done. So water meters typically last 15 to 20 years, with kind of the industry standard at 17 years. The majority of the waters in our town that were remained in town were in excess of 25, some 30, 40 years old. So what happens as the water meter gets old is they lose their accuracy. So we're really not billing all the water that somebody's using. So it's very inefficient. So it will more accurately read what homes are actually using. So the contractor that we hired to do the work is Ferguson Waterworks out of Blaine. They're about 95% done with the project as far as replacements go. They were required to send out multiple notices to property owners. We've sent out at least 4, along with door hangers, et cetera. And kind of as we went through the project, we've been tracking, the success rate as far as people setting up these appointments. As we've gone through, we've getting close to the end of the project, we anticipate 100 to 200 residents that have been ignoring these notices, have not set up appointments. So staff looked at, what can we do? The other thing that we noticed early on in the project is there was a handful of residents that did not want the radio reads within their homes for one reason or another. So we looked at solutions to take care of that. And history of other Ferguson working with other communities and similar issues throughout the metro. So in the 2022 fee ordinance, in anticipation of revising the water meter portion of the city municipal code, staff put in 2 additional fees. The first one is for a non-compliance fee, which basically means if you ignore notice that you have a non-functional water meter within your home and you elect to disregard city notice that it needs to be replaced, you would be charged $100 per quarter for a non-compliance fee. So these are non-functional meters. They're of an age where they no longer read correctly, or we cannot read them at all. The second fee is a manual read fee that was included in the ordinance, or the fee ordinance, and that was for $50 for a manual read. And those are the homes that we can't read by just driving by them. We physically have to get out of the vehicle, do a separate route, go up, touch a touchpad outside of the home with another specialized reading device that we have to buy for, a small number of homes overall. So those are the two fees that we included in the 2022 fee ordinance. Changing this ordinance language, working with our city attorney, allows us to actually charge those fees. So the language that's before you would allow us to actually use the fees that are in the fee ordinance. So passage of this ordinance, again, would do that. It would include the non-compliance as well as the manual meter reads. Second reading, we would propose to be on March 8th. At that time, council could adopt the ordinance for publication and enactment for city staff to move forward with this. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, we've had our first reading, and we'll, I think, reserve comment for March 8th.
We don't like to ask too many questions at this, but I'm just.
Go ahead.
The radio frequency, is that the health issue? Is why people don't want, I mean, I'm not a big fan of one-offs when there's, what's the radio frequency that's being used, and don't even need to answer me now. And has there been health effects? Is it like an AM? And is that why residents aren't doing it? Because even though we may or may not be collecting a fee, we still don't want to do that. It's not worth the effort. So just because I think radio's right. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good question. All right, moving on to, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Councilman
Mr. Mayor, if I might, I just want to flag, I have some concerns about the last two paragraphs and what expectations we are placing upon our citizens for maintaining their water meter. I have never received a communication from the city about what I need to do to properly care for my water meter. Since we're going to be foisting this on 8,500 people, I'd like to have some clarity in the ordinance about exactly what our obligations as users of those water meters are going to be, and if they are going to be replaced, what is the basis of the cost? Since we are quite explicit about the cost for not letting folks in. So I'm just drawing a couple of those. The wording is also, the city has the right to have access to every building. It's in the last page on the back side that it talks about after reasonable efforts, but that kind of comes at the end. And so I'm fuzzy on the authority that we're giving the city, and let's be a little more reasonable, please. But that's I'll bring those in greater detail on the second reading.
Noted. All right. Anyone else? Okay. Moving on to item 9, discussion. We have nothing scheduled. Item 10, communications from the city manager. Ms. Lindy. Ms. Crawford.
Thank you. Mayor, members of the council, in your packet you have a letter from the Charter Commission regarding the resolution, the original resolution to make a charter amendment. At this time, they are withdrawing that original resolution and going to meet again as a Charter Commission based on the first reading of the proposed charter amendment. So this is just communication for you. It was addressed to the mayor, put in the packet for the entire council. And lastly, a couple of updates regarding capital purchases. Since the last time that we have met, a new ambulance was ordered last week at the cost of $249,998.91. That is just under the budgeted amount of $250,000. So despite rising costs, Chief Peterson was able to negotiate with the vendors to stay within that budgeted amount. With 3 new picnic shelters were purchased for Lions Park at the cost of $126,163, which is under budget, under the budgeted amount of $130,000. We are using the same brand of shelters that we have been installing throughout the park system over the past decade, which have proven to be well-built and cost-effective. And those shelters were on the state bid contract. And lastly, staff has moved forward with on the CIP project of replacing the roof at the South Fire Station at the cost of $145,910, which is under budget in the amount of, budgeted amount of $155,000. This roof will be brought up to current codes, adding insulation, which will result in a more energy efficient building. So just a couple of budget updates for you, and that is what I have.
Okay. I think at this time, I can throw it to Councilmember Jones, because I believe we have a presentation for Ms. Kane, who's unfortunately leaving us, and we're disappointed. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to work with you, but why don't you come forward, and Councilman Jones, I think, has the traditional bear to present to you and some words to offer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me, seriously, this honor.
Yes.
Ms. Kane. And for, I'm guessing, over 30 years, you've improved many communities, multiple communities. And I look at it as how many people, you think about it, folks, have the opportunity to make a stamp, especially on a community that's 150 years old, at least. 1881, we're under 150, but that's official. We were here before then, you know that. Township, come on. I know, I gotta take it to you. But seriously, what you've done, what you've improved on with the projects that have been coming down our pike, I specifically look at Bulwark's agree or disagree, the project was a success. The Waters agree or disagree, the project was a success. And not just the big projects, the little projects, the home on 61, the home on County Road, these places that are just individual family homes, you and your staff have touched that. And Sam, I do need to, being the old guy here, from the transition to Mr. Robinson to Ms. Kane, I got to acknowledge her. She did help you transition a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's appreciated. But what mostly is meant for me, to you, is the ability for me to learn and to ask the questions and have those conversations, for you to take my phone call or ignore it, and address it at better timing for you, which is what is important. And we had great conversations, and over those conversations, I gained a friend. And a friend, things between me and you that we talk about, that just not just city business, but when you came to the hospital as a friend, that meant a lot to our family, and it was unique. And that's what you are. And I think you've done an outstanding job. I wish you'd stay longer, but we wish you and the council well to do what you need to do. Just be happy, because we're happy for you. And thank you for your service. Here's your bear.
Thank you. My staff has a song and dance. That's what they promised me, is they've got a rap song to share. No, it has been my distinct pleasure, and working with this community and this council, and changing a historic town is difficult. I've worked in greenfield communities up till now, growing suburbs of Chicago, and so, yeah, that was challenging, but it's also the most rewarding, because anyone can build out in a field. But getting good development to come here, that just enhances the community and makes it more livable for all of the residents of our community and visitors. So thank you so much. And I'm not going anywhere, so I'll be around. Thank you.
All right. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Well, I think it's cool.
I know.